With the NFL draft over and done with, it is time to go out and give our grades to each and every single team. I have 8 videos lined up for you guys, each and every division, and letting you know how I felt about each and every team, what they did in their premium picks, their trades, their reaches, their steals. I wanted to give some context behind what these grades actually mean when I hand them out, and especially for day 3, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Days 1 and 2, the value and how good of a pick they were, but for day 3, I'm not going to sit here and hyper analyze every single team's 6th and 7th round pick and nitpick them and say, well, he was wide receiver 28 on my board and you took him over wide receiver 24. It's like, at that point, it's just a little annoying to just go and nitpick every single draft pick. So most day 3 picks will be C plus, a fine pick. I'm not gonna like overly bury a team for that. C minus, I'll have picks that maybe I'm not as much of a fan of, but still, it's a 6th and 7th rounder. If you get a B minus, it's like that's a nice pick. I'm interested. I think that was a solid pick, a solid fit, decent value. If you get a B or better, and there was plenty of day 3 picks that got B plus, even A pluses in day 3, so that kind of scales upwards for how good of a value and how good of a pick that you made. I put in a lot of effort during this draft season, making sure I had like over 200 players scouted and got everything down, graded these things, and got the videos up to you as quick as I possibly can, so any support would be much appreciated. But I will be going through each of these teams in their divisions, I guess from worst to best, among the 4 teams. So let's get into our first team. So we are on to the first team in the AFC West. It's the Denver Broncos, who had a draft that not in love with outside of the top pick. Now, what I will say is going out in the first round with the 20th overall pick and getting Jahdae Barron, that's a lot of fun. You go and get Barron, and you have Pat Surtain, who just came off a Defensive Player of the Year. I mean, if there was anything that this team, I think, really needed, it was some help in the nickel and some versatility issues that they maybe could have had go a little bit better for already what was one of the league's better defenses. Well, Jahdae Barron's going to help that a lot, and give yourselves a lot more creativity and a lot more stuff to work with, because Barron, at Texas in his final year was able to play outside a little bit more. Now, I do think at the NFL level, you hope he doesn't have to play outside. I'd more so see him as a nickel safety hybrid player who should be playing, more nickel and safety in that hybrid role and not needing to play on the outside. You got Surtain, you got Riley Moss, who had a nice season last year, and having Barron in the nickel, or if you try to play him at safety, it's going to help out this secondary a lot. And this wasn't a secondary that was like desperately needing help after the good year that they had last year, but strength on strength, make that strength even stronger, and Barron's going to do that. Definitely their best pick of the draft. I felt like day 2 is where it went off the rails a little bit, because I will say this team needed a running back badly. The need was not the issue. Picking a running back in the 2nd round was not the issue. Picking RJ Harvey in the 2nd round maybe more so was. Once you got to that 60th pick, maybe some of the guys that Sean Payton would have loved. I think Sean Payton would have loved to have like a Travion Henderson on his team, but he was gone by then. So RJ Harvey with the 60th pick, that's just really rich for me in a spot where I just had a number of running backs over RJ Harvey. I mean, there were guys who went significantly lower than him that I had higher. One of the players that I talked about in a previous video, DJ Giddens, was a dude who I had higher rated than RJ Harvey. Giddens went in the 5th round. Damian Martinez was a player that I liked a little bit more. Damian Martinez went in the 7th round. It's not that I thought Harvey was like a bad running back. I still had him like roughly like my 10th running back in the class, but there were just a lot of guys that I liked more. There were a lot of players that went in his area that I thought were better, and there were just a lot of different places that they could have went. And while running back is a need for them, either you pick a guy who should be picked in the 2nd round, which maybe you could have went Caleb Johnson, maybe you could have went one of these other guys. There were guys on the board that they could have went. I don't love this. I thought maybe, go 3rd round, get Scadaboo, go somewhere else. But Harvey in the 2nd round, that's way higher than I would have taken him. Harvey was closer to maybe pick 101 is where I would have been more comfortable taking him. Maybe he would have been gone by then, but I don't love Harvey at 60. that was definitely a reach for me. And the fact that they also didn't address running back anywhere else in this draft, where even though RJ Harvey could be a nice player, you need more than just RJ Harvey, Audric Estime, Jaleel McLaughlin. It's still a rough running back room. And then they went get Pat Bryant in the third round. Again, don't love that draft pick. You would hope that that wide receiver could be something a little bit more exciting than a Pat Bryant, who's very much a role of a number 4, nice blocker, can do some stuff, but like very unspectacular. Like his role is that of, you put him in on some rundowns, he'll help you out a little bit. He's probably gonna be a number 4. I don't love that with a third round pick, and not even like a late third round pick like that 101 pick. I don't love that one either. Even then, though, Savion Jones, this is a D-line that has a lot of contributors on it already. I don't know how much Jones will get to see action-wise, but we'll see. On top of that, they also drafted Q Robinson, who, again, solid player, 4th round, fine with that. Value-wise, that lines up, but pretty loaded edge room, I feel like. They had so many edges that they had to trade Baron Browning, and they have a guy that I love in Jonah Ellis, who, they drafted last year, that I'm really excited for. And Nick Bonito had a breakout season. You got some interior defensive linemen that are really good. Jonathan Cooper, you signed to an extension. So I don't know what the path for these guys to see the field's going to be like, but never hurts to maybe get some more depth in there. And then you go and grab a punter, a tight end, nothing crazy there. But this draft class, to me, I don't think you're really left with a whole lot, and there's not like a crazy amount to talk about. I mean, maybe punter aside, maybe you do get a starting punter there, but you're left with defensive line rotation, a backup receiver, maybe split running back. He's going to see a big role this year because of the fact that they just don't have anybody else, but that's a little bit more damning to the fact that you're getting a lot of playing time maybe by default rather than because he's going to be that great. I think RJ Harvey was more so a guy I was like, oh, maybe he could be a nice number 2. He's going to need to maybe be better than just a nice number 2, unless somebody else breaks out. Maybe Audric Estime has a big year or whatever the case is, but he'll see some significant reps as probably splitting in a 3-man backfield. But other than that, I think you got Jahdae Barron, who could be a star player for you, but that was basically it in this draft class. It was Jahdae Barron and depth and maybe an okay running back. So I don't love this draft class. Thought they could have definitely utilized their day 2 picks a lot better than what they did. Savion Jones, I'm not bothered by, but Pat Bryant and RJ Harvey, definitely, if I was a Broncos fan, I'm not in love with that. I thought, especially at the running back spot for a team that needed a running back as badly as they did, RJ Harvey in the 2nd round is one of my least favorite picks of day 2 for a player that just shouldn't have been picked that high, and for a position that had so many talented players on it. You only leave the draft with RJ Harvey in an overdraft, so I don't love that. Now, I do think the rest of the teams in this division had pretty nice drafts, so you come in number 3, the Raiders get a B, which puts them roughly in the middle of the pack, but a pretty solid draft class in my opinion, and they took some players that I really did like. I mean, Ashton Jeanty, one of my favorite players, one of a lot of people's favorite players in this draft class, definitely worthy of the 6th overall pick at the running back spot. One of the best running back prospects we have seen in a very long time. You put him right up there in that conversation for me. If I'm looking at greatest running back prospects of the past decade, I'm saying Saquon Barkley, Bijan Robinson, Ashton Jeanty, whatever order you want to have them. Those are the 3 for me. Jeanty is that level of prospect, so getting him at 6th overall, I don't care about positional value. I'm looking at a team that, running back is more prevalent now after what Saquon Barkley did last year, and believe it or not, running back is important. And you look at a team that's led by Pete Carroll wanting a presence there, and a team that was rocking one of the worst running back rooms in the league last year with Zamir White and what was it, Alexander Madison rough there. So massive upgrade, big to get a running back there, and you got the best one in the draft. So 2nd round, you go Jack Besh, who you needed a wide receiver, absolutely. 2nd round, picking a wide receiver, valid. That is perfectly fine. a little bit higher than I would have had Besh, because I do think what this Raiders team needs is a little bit more of a true outside, maybe, I don't want to say number one, every team could use a number one, but like someone who gives you maybe a little bit more upside in that regard. I think Besh is definitely a complementary piece on an offense and can give you some stuff. And I don't know how much a wide receiver core of Jack Besh and Jacoby Myers scares you. I was thinking that, the big part of this draft that really held it back for me of getting maybe a B plus or better was the receiver picks, because if this team drafted, just hypothetically, maybe Jalen Noel and Kyle Williams type of players, if they picked Kyle Williams or Jalen Noel in the second round, or they picked one of these other guys, and I mean, with who was on the board in the fourth round too, Dante Thornton over a guy like Alec Manor, who is definitely the type of player the Raiders need as a high upside outside receiver. Dante Thornton he's tall, he's fast, he can run a straight line, and that's about it. Thornton was a receiver I didn't like at all, because he came from that Tennessee offense, which is, I mean, think of recent prospects that we have had. I think a clear one you could think of is like a Jalen Hyatt. He's, to me, like a taller Jalen Hyatt. he runs fast, and he is tall, and he doesn't have a diverse route tree. He doesn't have a lot of proper NFL offense experience. He doesn't do much. I was thinking, like, why do that? You have Trey Tucker if you want a deep threat. Like, I don't think Dante Thornton is going to be that much better than Trey Tucker. I didn't feel like something you needed to spend a pick on. Thornton, he's going to be a number 4 wide receiver on your team. This team needs a little bit more than a number 4. I thought, like, Alec Manor could have given you some excitement and some early play with some development potential. You could have gotten some of these other guys. I thought, Torrey Horton would have been a nice pick for them. I just think they whiffed at wide receiver. And even though Jack Besh, I think, would have been, I maybe would be a little bit higher on the Jack Besh pick if they left in the 4th round with Io Manor or Torrey Horton or one of these other guys. I'm like, okay, you put it all together, Jacoby Myers, Jack Besh, and Io Manor. I can get behind that a little bit. Dante Thornton doesn't really give you anything. That's basically a nothing pick for me. I think this team still desperately needs a wide receiver, and for a team that invested a 2nd round pick in Jack Besh to be a complimentary piece, they still need a number 1. They still need a guy you can go to. So I don't love that. But the other picks that they made, I do really love the idea of Darian Porter, who, I mean, all the athleticism in the world, go to the Raiders. Why not? Because Porter, being one of the more intriguing players in this draft class, a 24-year-old corner who never really got a chance to play, but when he did play in his final season, he was dominant. But you wonder, small sample size, why did he not play earlier to begin with? What's the development on him looking like? He's a little bit of an older prospect, but he's got so many athletic tools. I like Darian Porter. I think 3rd round for Porter is definitely a valid spot for him to go. And I'm really curious to see, like, was those couple of games, because they didn't ask him to do much at Iowa State. Whatever he was asked to do, he did very well, but he wasn't asked to do much. And this team, for the Raiders, for as much as they needed wide receiver help, they needed cornerback help just as badly. I think Porter's going to get to play a decent amount early on. I'm curious to see what kind of player he'll be early on and how he'll develop, but I really like the pick here in the 3rd round. Then with back-to-back picks in the 3rd round later on, interesting, you go back-to-back offensive linemen. One pick I didn't like and one pick I loved. So Caleb Rogers, don't love that one. Thought there were obviously much better tackles on the board because of the very next pick, but also just not a guy I would have put in day 2. But I guess you make up for it by taking Charles Grant in the 3rd round, who I love. Charles Grant, I thought he was a player that I would have been fine if he went in the 2nd round. This is the dude who has been trying to bulk up a little bit, but I do think gives you so much upside, just so much to work with. He came from a small school at William and Mary, so maybe you're going to say level of competition is rough. It is, but I mean, there are some of these smaller school players. What you want them to do at smaller schools, you want them to dominate. A guy like Charles Grant had some dominant moments, and even then, he's still building out his frame. He's still getting bigger. He's getting better. His trajectory is just way up. He's one of those players that has just gotten so much better year to year. And to spend a third round pick on a tackle who I think has a very bright future on this team and to whatever team he would have went to, it's really good. And this isn't a guy who needs to be rushed into a starting job. You have Colton Miller, and DJ Glaze was a very solid pick from last year's draft. So maybe this is the long-term Colton Miller replacement. We'll see. I don't think the Raiders should be rushing to move on from Colton Miller, but at the very least, you got yourselves a really nice, more than nice, maybe really good number 3 tackle. And maybe you do have a long-term replacement for a guy like Colton Miller. Maybe your tackle future of the, tackle duo of the future is Charles Grant, DJ Glaze, and, it could be a fun, little, cheap, young duo to build around. So I really like Charles Grant. I thought that was probably their best value pick of the entire draft. And then we talked about Dante Thornton. Didn't love that one in the 4th round, but Tonka Hemingway, like that one, and, they really stacked up on the defensive line. Going with Tonka and JJ in the middle, 4th and 6th round. I mean, both of those guys were guys who could have been reasonably picked higher, maybe less so Tonka Hemingway, but I like what they're doing. We'll see what the whole situation with Christian Wilkins is going to look like and how healthy he's going to end up being. This team did definitely, even outside of Christian Wilkins, need some interior defensive line rotation, some help. So I love the 2 picks there, going to get that. And then you go have some fun, I guess, in the 6th round. Go get Cam Miller at quarterback, and then a QB receiver hybrid positional, maybe if you want to call him a Taysom Hill type, in Tommy Mellott. So we're not going to complain about that. 6th round pick, 7th round pick, Cody Lindenberg. We're not going to nitpick those, but I thought those were at least pretty fun and solid picks. And I thought, other than the Dante Thornton pick, day 3 for them went pretty solidly. Nothing amazing, but you made the most of getting a nice haul in day 3, other than the Dante Thornton pick, which is really what holds it back. But other than my questioning of the receiver picks that they made and not loving the Caleb Rogers pick, I thought this was a pretty solid draft overall from the Raiders. And the upside is here. Charles Grant, high upside. Darian Porter, high upside. Ashton Jeanty could be a top 5 running back in the league. This team definitely drafted with the hopes of being able to develop some of these players. And the Raiders, I mean, Geno Smith, Ashton Jeanty, Brock Bowers, got a couple of other, solid pieces. Max Crosby. They got some high-end players, and they have, a valid quarterback. They have players at, premium positions. They got a quarterback. They got a running back. They got a left tackle. They got an edge rusher. They got an interior D lineman. The Raiders could be a sneaky fun team. I don't know about playoffs, but a little sneaky fun team to watch this season. So then that moves us to the next team, which did get a slightly higher grade, just because I liked what they did. Less picks that I disliked, the less picks that I question, that being the LA Chargers, who get a B+ from me. I think they slightly, edged out the Raiders a little bit. But 1st round, you go with Omarion Hampton, who is just an awesome player. Hampton, I mean, getting him with Harbaugh, I am obviously excited for. It doesn't really feel like they needed to sign Najee Harris, because to me, I can draft Omarion Hampton and just give him the keys to the offense and let him run wild. And, maybe you could have a nice number 2 back in there. But I don't know what the need for Najee Harris is going to be with Omarion Hampton here. And, the only knocks and drawbacks I have on Omarion Hampton was I would like him to be a little bit more creative in the open field when it comes to just not putting his head down and trying to run over everybody. He definitely tries to set the tone. He likes to try to truck people. He likes to try to run people over. And sometimes it's hey, you got a safety in the open field. You could put a little juke on him, put a little move on him. You don't need to try to run everybody over. And then some of the vision stuff, he's inconsistent at times with his vision, but if he can, get a little bit more creative and get a little bit more consistent with his vision, I mean, we're looking at one of the better running backs in the NFL, because he has all the talent and the ability in the world. He has some 3-down potential. He has the ability to just be a special player at running back. So, to me, worth a 1st round pick, especially for a team that wants to run the football and was able to do it pretty well with J.K. Dobbins and a a cast of like misfits last year. Um, you got your guy, so definitely got to give you credit for that. Second round, they go and pick Trey Harris, who very divisive player, a guy who, depending on who you ask, is the next DK Metcalf, and if you ask another guy, he just stinks. To me, I was a little lower on Trey Harris. I don't love him in the second round. I understand him though. I understand a team loving him, and I understand the fit for the Chargers who just need an outside receiver. You have Lad McConkey. You hit a just monster pick. Loved Lad McConkey. Last season, I called Lad a top 20 player in the entire draft class. So, I guess I'm proving to be right about that one because I loved Lad. To me, I would have taken Lad like so high in the draft. I loved him. But, you get Trey Harris. I don't love him as much, but contested catches is what he does best. He was able to go to Ole Miss and, wasn't really afforded his full season against like the SEC schedule to really bolster his draft stock. So maybe the Chargers are, projecting a little bit, saying he would have been a little bit better if he got to play out the whole season, which is probably true. In terms of draft stock teams, just kind of what have you done for me recently is a big thing here. So, he got to farm against some lesser opponents, didn't get to play the SEC schedule. I do worry about his overall ability to separate at the next level, with these guys who are very much contested catch artists. You have to worry about how that translates to the NFL. Coverage gets even tighter. The defense gets a little tougher, a little bit more physical, a little bit better. Will he be able to translate that to the league? What I will say is, at the very least, Trey Harris does have some other skills to him. He has some solid catch and run ability. He has some nice speed to him. Like, he's got some talent there. I don't think I would go as far as to say DK Metcalf, because people like to see, bigger, faster Ole Miss wide receiver and say DK Metcalf or AJ Brown. He's not AJ Brown. He's not DK. But I also wouldn't say he's as low as some of the other Ole Miss receivers that have come out over the years. I think he'll be better than like Elijah Moore. No disrespect to Elijah Moore, but I am intrigued in Trey Harris because I think he went to a good spot for him in a role where he's going to be able to just play on the outside. And, Herbert also, good arm, strong arm, going to be able to give him some opportunities. I'd be scared if he went to a team with, some outside receivers and a passive quarterback who'd be afraid to give his playmakers a chance to make a play. You need a quarterback who can at least trust Trey Harris. So he went to a quarterback in Herbert that isn't afraid to let the ball fly sometimes. Herbert is a little passive at times on like third down and long situations. But, if it's not third down and long and you have an opportunity to go and throw a go ball to Trey Harris, I think Herbert will do that for you. So I think it's a nice spot for Harris to go. I give it a B grade. And then they go and take one of my guys in the third round in Jamari Caldwell, who I absolutely love. Jamari Caldwell, for a team that needed interior D-line help, some of the big D tackles that were available to them. A guy like Tyleik Williams went in the first round. Some of the other nose tackles were really high draft picks. And I'm like, man, outside of the first round, if you need to go into day two and get just a big body in the middle of your defense and get a guy who can be an effective, I think even high ceiling nose tackle for you, Jamari Caldwell is the person I would trust to be that guy. And of course, Jim Harbaugh identifies him and says, you know what, we need this guy on our team. And this team very much did need interior D-line help. They lost some players, and even then, the D-line that they put together last year on the interior was pretty weak. So I don't think it's going to be crazy that Jamari Caldwell is immediately going to slot in as an effective, high volume player for them in terms of playtime as a rookie. I think he is going to slot in though as a player who's going to get a lot of playing time early on in his career. I think he is so good. I think he has just so much potential to him as well. I broke him down a little bit more in the top 100 prospects video if you want to go and, look at a more specific breakdown of a guy like Jamari Caldwell. I have timestamps in that video, so I don't want to go like too far in depth on every player in this class. This is just an overall picture of what they did in their draft grades, but I love Jamari Caldwell and I love the draft pick. Then you go and get Kyle Kennard in the fourth round. Really like that one too. Kennard was a guy who was like, I wouldn't be, down on it if you maybe slid him into the late third round, but to get him here in the fourth round, that's about a nice spot for him, about where he should be going. And this team lost Bosa. I mean, Bosa was already on the decline and was often injured. So to go and get Kyle Kennard, at least, him Khalil Mack, and a guy who I am excited to see get a little bit more of an opportunity, Tui Pelotu, who I think is going to slot in as a very nice starter too. So you get Kyle Kennard as your kind of designated number 3 rotational guy. I do really like. The only pick in the draft that I was like really down on, I guess, but it's a 5th round pick, so that's why it doesn't knock the grade too much. I'm not going to be like too harsh on a team for making a 5th round pick I don't like, but Keandre Lambert-Smith from Auburn wasn't a guy I had in my top 20 receivers, top 25 receivers even. Just wasn't a guy I would have personally taken anywhere, earlier than maybe the 7th round. I want to skip over the next pick for a second because we'll save him for last, but Branson Taylor, solid, sure, 6th round tackle. RJ Mickens, solid because he was a player that definitely could have been picked 5th round, 4th round even. I thought he would have been a little bit higher, so nice value there to grab him in the 6th round. And then, a 7th round corner, but I might even be underselling it. Oronde Gatson in the 5th round. I love Oronde Gatson. Chargers fans, please fall in love with some Oronde Gatson, because I even brought him up a little bit in my top 100 video. He was one of the players outside the top 100 who I said, keep an eye on. And Oronde Gatson, I will be keeping an eye on. So I maybe off sheer value gave it a fair grade because I had him in like my 120s, so I gave it a B. But like just off how much I like Gatson, I'd probably give it like an A- just because I just love what Gatson gives to you. The only issue is I do find it interesting that Jim Harbaugh would take a player that just isn't good at blocking at tight end. Like, he's just not a good blocker at all. But he's building up his frame. He's getting a little bit bigger, a little bit tougher. And when you want to talk about somebody who has some of the best hands in this draft class, regardless of position, Gatson. Gatson has some of the best hands in this class. Like, if I'm making a top 5 list of best hands, Gatson's in that list. He brings in everything. He's got a nice catch radius. He brings everything down. He has got versatility where, even though he's not a traditional inline tight end where he's not going to be able to block, but he is a, flex tight end who could throw out in the slot, who's going to have a multitude of usage opportunity for him as a pass catcher. I think any way you want to utilize a pass catching tight end, Gatson's going to be able to do that for you. And I'm not going to be surprised if there's a world where he's a lot better than some of the tight ends taken ahead of him. Like, to put this into perspective, I had Oronde Gatson as, I believe, my tight end 7. I had Ferguson, who the Rams took in top 50. I had Ferguson below Gatson. I really like Gatson as maybe not a superstar potential tight end, but just a really fun quarterback. Should love him. I mean, he's just going to be so awesome, and I hope he does get the opportunity. The Chargers do like to use a multitude of tight ends, but I really hope he gets onto the field in a decent amount of opportunities, and I wouldn't be surprised if, even if Gatson never becomes like a highly productive superstar tight end, this is the type of dude who's catching 500 yards and like 7 touchdowns, because in the red zone, he can be a demon for you because he's just going to catch everything thrown his way. So I love that pick off of sheer value and maybe potentially the fact that he's just a little bit more limited in the fact that maybe he'll never be a great blocker or even an okay blocker. I had to give it a B, but just off the sheer amount that I love Oronde Gatson, I'm going to be excited to see how much he gets to play for this Chargers team. I'm really looking forward to seeing him. And how about we get to number 1 in the division, and probably a draft class I'm a little bit higher on than other people. I don't see people going crazy for this Chiefs draft class. People like it, but I love what they did because they took a couple of my guys, 2 guys that I talked extensively about in my top 100 video, and as 2 guys who maybe were not the top of the line, top tier prospects, just 2 guys that I was higher on than maybe some other people. So we start at the top, Josh Simmons. Everyone kind of was intrigued of if Josh Simmons, how high he'd go, because everyone acknowledged that Simmons, injuries aside, was a top 20 player. I had him, counting the injuries and everything, I had him in like the 30s because, injuries do knock you down a little bit. But everyone's like, man, I really don't want Josh Simmons to go to the Chiefs because that'd be a little scary. And everyone kind of thought like, man, it could happen, but like, I hope not. And well, it happened. Josh Simmons goes to the Chiefs at 32. Your biggest issue was tackle. And if Simmons is perfectly fine and the injury is not like debilitating, it's not long lasting, it's not an issue, and he can get on the field and be everything that people thought he could be, well, you got your franchise tackle there. Great. You got that at the last pick of the 1st round as well. So good job on the Chiefs to go and snag him at 32. Then in the second round, they make a bold pick, I would say, Omar Norman Lott, who second round's a little bold, but I very much understand it because while Omar Norman Lott is a player who we just don't know or don't think he can play the run. I mean, this is a dude who's played a collective like 100 snaps against the run his entire career. He just doesn't play against the run. They sub them off always against the run. But even still, for a team like the Chiefs, even if Norman Lott is never going to be able to play the run at a good level, even if it's just like at best it's average, that's not what you're drafting Norman Lott for. You're drafting him to be a pass rushing specialist and a closer for this team. Contending teams are going to draft players who are going to be in situations that teams maybe lesser than them aren't. You know, more teams against the Chiefs are going to be passing because they're a contending team. Most likely in a lot of games, the Chiefs are going to be winning games, and you need a guy who could rush the passer and be in third down situations, third down packages. You need a guy to get after Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson and Omar Norman Lott. There's one thing he can do, it's rush the quarterback. So he's not going to be a every down player. Maybe he surprises us with his ability to develop as a run defending player, but as a third down, as a closer, as a guy who just is in on certain packages, an awesome role player, an awesome rotational guy, Omar Norman Lott's definitely going to be a fun player to have. And I'm not going to be surprised if he does cause a little bit of havoc in the middle, getting a couple of sacks every season. So you have yourself at the very least a good designated pass rusher, and maybe he could develop into a more every down player if he is able to play the run, because it goes back to was he not asked to do it, or could he just not play the run? Tennessee rotates their defensive lines quite a bit, and everybody gets off the field. Even James Pierce would come off the field in certain situations, and everybody came off the field. So was he just not asked to defend the run, or just can he not? I would hope that he is at least passable and competent and isn't a liability there. And if that's the case, the Chiefs are going to be happy with an average run defender and a pretty nice pass rusher if that's the case. And this could be even better than a B grade if we knew if he could defend the run or not. The only pick in this draft I didn't like was Ashton Gelati in the third round, top of the third round basically, so 66th overall. Gelati, just not a guy I had in a day two position, not a guy I would have had in like my top 100, not a guy I was a big fan of. So for me, that just comes down to a difference of, you know, when it came to this deep edge rush class, you know, once you got to like 12, 13, you know, 12 through 20, for example, there was just so many edges where it's just kind of pick who you like, and a lot of guys who could fill a lot of different roles. For me, Ashton Gelati was just not a guy I liked that much. But I mean, you know, I'm willing to admit if I'm wrong, because the Chiefs went out and picked a number of other players that I really like. So you can get that instant sometimes where it's like, man, the Chiefs keep picking all these players, or a team picks all these players that you really like, and then they make one pick you really don't like, and it's like, well, I liked all these other picks. Maybe I'm just wrong about this one. Maybe I'm just wrong about Gelati, because I like Simmons, I like Norman Lott, and, you know, their next two picks I'm in love with. I'll kind of circle back to them in a minute, though, because I'll go to the 7th round. Brashard Smith, I do think this team does very much need some running back help. They waited till the 7th round to do it, but for a 7th round running back, definitely a guy who is better than some of the other players that got taken on the board ahead of him in the 5th and 4th round. So Smith can give you some solid play, I think, even early on. I'm not going to be surprised if he does see the field for this Chiefs team. It's not like the path to get on the field is all that hard. They were rocking a washed-up Kareem Hunt last year who was struggling to run more than 10 yards down the field. So, I mean, it's not like the running back room is exactly tough down there in Kansas City. So maybe we'll get to see some of Brashard Smith. Then you get Jeffrey Bassa in the 5th round. Another nice pick. Of all these kind of lottery ticket developmental linebackers, Bassa was one of the better ones that I felt like was going to be maybe even a 4th round pick. But to get him in the 5th round, this was a team that has done pretty well with linebackers. Nick Bolton and Leo Chenal, who I really like. And now Jeffrey Bassa, you're going to be able to sit and develop a little bit and see what you can become. So, you know, with those 5 picks, you're already looking at like a B plus, probably a B plus draft. What takes it over the top for me is they go and take 2 of my guys. Noel Williams, who, the thing on Noel Williams was I really like him as a physical, get-in-your-face, man-to-man cornerback. And, you know, the thing about a player like him, I didn't have him too far off of a guy like Azariah Thomas, who I was like, man, Thomas maybe is a little bit more sticky in man-to-man coverage and is a little bit more, you know, a consistently good coverage corner. he's also a full point 0.1 slower on the 40 time, basically, where Azarea ran like essentially a 4.6 and Noel Williams ran a 4.5. Noel Williams has just a little bit better translatable NFL speed. And I'm glad that at least they went pretty close to one another and close to where I had them ranked, because it says that maybe the NFL didn't think that much differently about them, which kind of makes me feel a little bit more validated, because I was really close to just saying, yeah, I like Noel Williams even more, and I really like Noel Williams, so he's my type of corner, maybe a corner that doesn't exist as much in the NFL nowadays because of how much teams play off zone coverage and how much you want to play people back off the line of scrimmage, and you don't want to get beat up over the top. But if you want to press corner to get in your face, kind of punch you in the shoulder, lock you down a little bit. He's got a lot of years of starting experience under his belt, and for as much experience as he has, I think he's got like 4 years as a starter or whatever, he's still relatively young at 22 years old, so he's experienced. He's still pretty young despite having that experience. Usually when you say, oh, a 4 or 5 year player, you're thinking 24 years old or something, but he's just 22 years old, got a lot of experience under his belt, I think can play early on, is physical, gets in your face, has some nice ball production. I really like Noel Williams a lot. And then this is where you get to pick up on the maybe steal of the draft. I think that, like, it's not crazy to call this the steal of the draft. Jalen Royals to the Chiefs at pick 133. Royals is a player that I am so high on, is a player that I love so much. To put into perspective how high I am on him, and for people who will be, probably ready to comment how dumb I am on this, I had Jalen Royals rated higher than Matthew Golden, who went in the first round. Royals was a player I put a round 1 to 2 grade on. I talked about him a lot in my top 100 video. I am about as high on Jalen Royals as you could be. If a team took him in the second round, I would have been crediting them for making a fun pick there. But to get him as late as they did, man, this is a dude who just played at Utah State, so just not a lot of buzz behind him. He was a guy, though, that I was kind of in on going into the year. He was my number 7 wide receiver going into last college football season, and I think he ended up my number 7 wide receiver going into the draft. So, they stayed very similar, and maybe that was a little bit why some of the hype on him didn't go crazy, because he didn't have like a breakout, crazy season. But this is a dude who, came from, I believe, like Georgia Military University or Georgia Military Academy or whatever. Came over to Utah State. Obviously not a lot of buzz at Utah State, not a lot of creativity at Utah State, because he wasn't asked to do a crazy amount of stuff when it came to like slot usage and maybe design touches and everything. So he wasn't a player that was schemed for. He wasn't a player that was, I guess, treated like a superstar. But for Utah State, he was a star player, in my opinion. And you may be looking at all of that and saying, well, what makes him so good? Well, if there is a thing about him we'll start off with, is like his build is so good. He's got one of those rare builds where it's just those, like maybe a 6 foot wide receiver who's got like this compact, thicker, harder to bring down build. You think of certain receivers like CD Lamb and Jamar Chase, who's got like they maybe aren't like 6'5" and muscles everywhere, but like they're just really compact and so difficult to bring down. Jalen Royals is a really good yards after catch wide receiver, and funnily enough, could very well be in a role like how they used Rashee Rice. And, to just touch on Rashee Rice, this is a dude who is coming off an injury, could get suspended, whatever the case is. By the time Rashee Rice, if he gets suspended next year, could have a full season, fully recover from an ACL and no suspension, you'll be on the final year of his rookie contract. And do you even want to deal with paying him and how much of a headache he could potentially be, even though he was good when he played last year? Do you want to deal with all that coming off a knee injury and some legal troubles to pay him? Maybe not. Well, if you're looking for a replacement and a guy who I think could do even more than Rashee Rice, like this is how high I am on him. He can line up on the outside. He can line up in the slot. You can get him design touches. I think he can work at all 3 levels of the field, in the short, medium, and the deep area. Slot fades is something that he did pretty well at the college level. So I think he's got a nice ability there to make some really good catches outside of his body. He's not one of those, body catchers who needs to kind of, the ball to hit them in the perfect spot. He will extend, he will reach, he will go and make plays. He will do it along the sidelines. He will do it in the intermediate. He can work every area of the field. He can catch and run. He maximizes every bit of his frame to make himself as hard as the tackle as humanly possible. He's got good hands. He's just got everything you want at the wide receiver spot. I genuinely think, this is the type of player where if he came from a bigger college, he would have been drafted a lot higher. And I don't usually say that with a lot of players. NFL is usually good at identifying talent and being like, okay, regardless of what college you went to, it is what it is. You're a good player or you're not a good player. But Royals very much was handicapped by the lack of talent at Utah State and the lack of creativity. But every time you've seen him on the field doing something, it was just so well done. And in a player that should not be in day 3, a player who should be sitting there getting drafted off the board in the 2nd round, at the very least the 3rd round. I am going to go out here and say I'm not going to be surprised if the Chiefs' most productive wide receiver in a few years is Jalen Royals. And that's counting Xavier Worthy. And at the very least, I think he could be their 2nd most productive player aside from, Xavier Worthy, because obviously in a couple of years we assume Travis Kelce won't be around, and if he is, he probably won't be 1,000-yard tight end good. He'll probably be pretty washed in a couple of years, but I think the Chiefs have found themselves a long-term star wide receiver in day 3. And I don't go out and say, yeah, this 4th round or 5th round pick is going to be a star. I don't say that very often. I don't know how many players I've said that about in this class. Probably, maybe Royals is the only one. But I think the Chiefs have found themselves a star wide receiver, and my grading of this draft class is like, man, I think you might have got the steal of the draft. You took a corner I love in Noel Williams. You took a tackle who you desperately needed, who's talented, in Josh Simmons. You took a designated pass rusher. You took a developmental linebacker, a solid running back. I don't think they missed with any of their picks. Gelati is the only pick I don't like that much, and I still, at the very least, understand it. I think the Chiefs did a phenomenal job, and I just hope that Jalen Royals gets to play. And, maybe for the sake of some Jalen Royals stocks, I kind of want to see Rashee Rice, 1, get punished for, the crimes he commits and the stuff that he does, because he's a menace. But also, just because it gives Jalen Royals a better chance of getting some action on the field. And I do think that Jalen Royals will be a great player for this Chiefs team. But there is every chance he's like Sky Moore and he stinks it up, and you come back to this video and say, man, you hyped up this guy Jalen Royals so much and he stinks. Don't think he'll stink. I think he'll be a nice player for them. So that is going to do it for this video. Let me know what you all think. If you're am I a little too high? I'm probably a little too high. I'm about as high on Jalen Royals as anyone could possibly be. But let me know what you all think. Like I said, a lot of videos here that this all took a lot of time to do. 8 videos in 8 days, all of them roughly about 40 minutes a video to get them all out. It took a lot of time, so I hope you all enjoyed them. Like, comment, and subscribe to let me know if my time was well spent, and I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you guys all in the next one.